Hello, Jamie of the Druid Diaries here. Just thought I'd pop in. A few things have been coming to mind. I've been watching a lot of material on YouTube, a wide range. The most recent one regarding the Fae. And I just wanted to touch base with you about family relationships with ephemera. It's something that I am curious about. I believe a lot of us do have these relationships. And I think that sometimes generationally they can be oppressed or become hidden intentionally or through cultural shifts, perhaps fear. And one experience which I've spoken to you all about before that have watched my videos was my dream of the Kelpie. There is one where I wasn't taught about the Kelpie, but I had a dream of the Kelpie. And I wasn't born in Scotland. I was born in Canada and raised in Canada. And really, only now that I am an adult and I'm really learning a great deal more about the cultures that my family were parts of, that I'm starting to see that there was more content than I initially realized. But as far as I can recall, I didn't have that experience. No one was telling me any real lore about Kelpies or the Fae, and nor did I see any connection between them. I guess what I want to say is that, whatever culture you come from, whatever lineages, branches, how your family tree has spread in time or where it spreads to, the root, I believe this all travels with us. How? I have some theories, but I'm not feeling like sharing those. And it can, I imagine, happen too if you're adopted by association, familia. So I encourage people not to spread fear, but share the lore, share the stories of your root cultures with your children or grandchildren. Don't leave them in the dark and feeling that they may have lost something special about themselves. I love Canada. I'm a Canadian citizen. My family is not long really here, just since the early 1900s. And my mother didn't become a Canadian citizen until her late 40s. I believe it was late 40s, something along that line. Regardless, she had thought she was Canadian. When she married my dad, she thought she'd become Canadian. And she had been a member of the Royal Canadian Air Force as well. So, the shock and hurt and upset when she found she had to go through Canadian citizenship procedures or be deported. Anyway, I was raised to be a proud Canadian. My father was all about that. We're raising a Canadian, that's who you are. And I felt kind of like this homogenous white girl. I don't think I identified as that really, maybe never, but I recognized that I had roots across the ocean. I loved this land. I was respectful by nature of the land and of the indigenous people, and didn't believe my history books when it said remember, I'm like over 60, but these were a lost people. No, that just can't be. How would that happen? I haven't heard bloodthirsty tales about slaughtering people. And like, where did they go? Did they all die of this mass plague of illness, that was brought over to people with an unsuspecting immune system? It's just, I thought this just doesn't feel right. I was just a little girl, and I knew that instinctively that this was not right, that someone was telling me a bit of a lie here, a big lie. And so I slowly became aware of colonialism. I was very drawn to the stories of this land because the land always speaks to us, right? It's here. Wherever you are in the world, you go visiting, you have a listen. Listen with your heart, listen with all your senses to the land where you happen to be at any given time. And the land and the people of the land have stories. And I have listened to some of those stories, a modest amount, and I really connect with those types of stories. Not every single one individually, but I felt a loss at not knowing my own stories, my own family tree. And that doesn't really diminish my being Canadian. In fact, I think that visible minorities or visible ethnic groups kind of get a pass, and lucky you. I think this is great. To remember your stories. I don't know so much about Alberta. I've noticed there's this desire to create Canadians by washing away or just away things like our stories and our lineage identities. I don't believe in that. I grew up in Toronto, and what a rich cultural landscape Toronto is. My family belonged to the Japanese Canadian Cultural Center because my father worked with Raymond Moriyama, the architect on the Ontario Science Centre, not as a member of his architectural team, but as someone working on the museum part of that. And it wasn't appropriating. We were experiencing, and it was enlightening, and it was amazing. And that's how I feel about other cultures, Sharing things culturally makes life very rich. And I thought to myself, well, this doesn't make any sense. I'm Canadian, and does that mean I have a Canadian culture? And what does that mean then to me? Is that my culture? I got really confused. I thought, this makes no sense. Okay, so here someone immigrates. I wasn't thinking of myself at the time, who has an absolutely obvious difference in culture. Of course, there's all the universalities and we're all human beings, but that's not what I'm talking about. It's identity that I'm getting at here. And these folks are encouraged to keep some cultural identity as well as, adapt and merge and become Canadians, which is great. And I'm thinking, well, where's mine? And why are people resenting me and saying I'm not letting them into the Canadian culture because I'm white and I'm born here? And all of this was so confusing, and it's still confusing to articulate. I didn't write a script here. This is my diary. This is called Rambling. And so I thought, gee, I really want to listen to these people. So when I had opportunities and when the time is right, and people are opening up about things, I just sit back and listen and encourage people to talk about, where they came from and, what their beliefs are. And I may or may not agree with everything, but gosh, it's good sharing. It's awesome. It's good to know these things. And I'm thinking, well, where are my stories? I mean, I am here. I'm not Indigenous. I was born here. I'm not Indigenous. Okay. So the stories of this land prior to, not my ancestors, but, because we had only just been here since the 1900s, but prior to like what is now called Canada. Those stories aren't really my stories. They're stories of this land. And they're wonderful, but they're of, they grew out of another interaction with another people. And we're all in this together. That's not dismissing that. I agree that we are all in this together, but I really respect the rich landscape of culture and people's different roots. I mean, we may all merge, yeah, but it's boring. We're not clones, and isn't it incredible that cultural differences are so interesting, as are cultural universalities. Those are also really interesting. And here's Canada, all about diversity. And I'm thinking, back to what our current Prime Minister in 2019 said about, Canada, I paraphrase, wants diversity. I'm thinking, okay, in order to have diversity, there has to be somewhere for it to come from, right? So you have to nurture diversity. You can't just let it all like disappear. And this just brings lots of different kinds of problems, perhaps, to light, and attitudes that somehow we as human beings need to be more accepting and appreciative of both that universality and the differences, and that having differences is not automatically a terrible thing. It is quite magnificent. We don't want to be fighting, tooth and nail, or having bloodshed over those differences. And myself, I dislike it intensely when anyone is oppressed, including myself. And so, I feel empathy for that, and it upsets me when a woman on the other side of the ocean is appearing to be oppressed. And so I want clarification. I want to know, are you oppressed? Are you in this situation because you want to be? Are you sure? Because I know sometimes I'm oppressed, and I haven't even realized it at times. And then I've sat back and go, wait a minute, this isn't right. And why didn't I stand up for myself? Or why did that person talk to me that way? And a lot of times we don't recognize when people are being dismissive of us, or holding us down, because we become so used to expecting it. We just kind of like have found ways of shielding ourselves and pushing that thought back. And it's not you're sort of raising ourselves up to put anyone else down. No. That's not where I'm coming from. I want people around the world to be doing well. I want to do well. I struggle in my own way. And, I don't like comparing pain. One person's pain tolerance is different from another. They may have an inherent ability to deal with things better than maybe someone else, or maybe myself. Resilience can be taught, but it can also be something I think some people are gifted with. It's a natural resilience. However, where I'm sort of meandering here does, I feel, relate. And I was thinking, well, I don't want to take somebody else's stories. I can't say that story is my own. And one of the stories I was exposed to very early came through a gift of a beautifully illustrated book on Hiawatha, and inside that book was the fantastic lore of the three sisters, the Iroquois three sisters teaching. And I, cherish that. Absolutely, it struck my heart. But I was aware, I was going, but that didn't come from my people. But I love it, and I really respect it, and I've learned something here. This is powerful. And I sensed the power of that story and the importance of that story, even though it came to me through a book, that wasn't by an Indigenous person. It was done respectfully enough that, or it was just me, because that's how I interpret things. I pull out of there the good stuff, right? And I tried, especially in those days, tried to kind of swoosh away any of that negative garbage or condescension that sometimes writers did put out there, and some writers still do, towards Indigenous people or other people other than people they would personally identify with more. And again, wanting those like origin stories, where do I come from? What's my story? I don't want to steal from anybody else. And I kind of felt lost, really, really lost for that. And because of a really strong connection with landscape, and I'm not saying that in a superficial way. The land speaks. the life of the land resonates through us. We're alive, and there's this exchange, and you cannot help for it to be there. And I was aware of it, and I'm still aware of it. I'm not able to always translate it. I'm lucky if I can verbalize it or have it come through my artwork or in some way, but I acknowledge it all the time. And somewhere inside me, there is a longing to walk where my ancestors walked, go sit on the grass, just spend time with those standing stones. One day, I hope to. It would mean a great deal to me. But that longing and that need has never taken away from the love I have of the land here in North America. But more and more I see, my connection to where my ancestors are from. My children are half Indigenous North American through their father. And I hope that as they travel through life, they will be these magnificent sort of global citizens, that they will recognize their roots are deep and vast and cherish both those aspects of their parental roots. I find a lot of parallels between Indigenous Canadian experiences and cultures to that of the Scots, the Picts, the Irish, the peoples like the Welsh, and yes, I am part English, whatever that means. And the more I study, the more complex that becomes. There's Norwegian, there's all these complex mixes. And my grandparents came here to make a better life, and I shake my head sometimes and I think, yeah, I think my parents' lives were better. They did all right. They did okay. And by this I don't mean, to become wealthy is like the be all and end all of our existence, and I don't judge people by how much they earn per year. It's very nice if you can earn a good living, but it's not what your character is made from. And I'm grateful for the education I have. I am very grateful for it. One of my sons says I should go back to university. I find that hard to imagine, though I would love it in many respects. The older you get, it's like you really have to think before you spend your time and resources on something. I don't think I could afford it, and I'm not sure what I would want to spend that time and resources on right now. I'm doing my Druid studies. I'm studying about my ancestral cultures. And that's feeding my soul. It's meaning a tremendous amount to me. I am reflecting that through my artworks. Right now, I've been working on the Kelpies again. And memory, thinking about genetic memory, collective unconscious, how potentially spirits, ephemeral associations, perhaps deity, travel generationally with us, whether we know it or not. And allowing in that work my subconscious to have somewhat of a say. So these aren't necessarily strictly literally illustrative of Kelpie tales, though that may lead to that at some point. It's an exploration of how that relationship is expressing itself through me. So very authentic to the artist and to my experience of intergenerational relationships with origins, roots, the path that our lineage takes. So I think that everyone, whether you're adopted, whether you have had these stories kept from you, as I did, or not, I encourage you to learn them. And I feel in some ways, I feel more Canadian now that I'm learning the stories of my ancestors than I did before I didn't have them. And I encourage, especially those of you that might be considered sort of the generic white Canadian, and this I find humorous, actually, in some respects. Although I haven't been here very long in terms of my family, people place me in that just by visuals. And I always find that odd that, someone whose family originated in China and has been here for generations thinks somehow that I'm more Canadian than they are. I don't think so. No. It's just, you definitely are more Canadian than I am. So it probably is not good to compare, but it makes you think, when someone turns to you and assumes that somehow, you've been here longer just based on the color of your skin. I can see how people make that judgment also because, I don't have a British way of speaking. I don't speak Gaelic. I don't speak Irish. I don't speak Old English. And I certainly don't speak Welsh. And I think there actually might, surprise to me, there might be a little Welsh in the family. I'm studying my family tree. But learning about the different languages, striving to speak them, whether it's Gaelic or Irish, old or new, a Norse language, old English. Wow, that one's really interesting. And also striving to maybe even sing some of the old songs in those languages. Follow them on YouTube. Find someone who sings it properly and sing along. You may never learn that language, but to have it flow out between your lips from your heart, I think is an excellent thing to do. It makes me cry a little because I in doing so, it pulls something in my heart that I feel really bad that I cannot speak those languages. But at least I try. At least my heart does feel those things, and I'm grateful for that. I really, before I had this experience of sort of singing along to YouTube, people, and really striving to speak Gaelic and also the other languages associated with my family tree. I had tried Old English already in high school. I was lucky. I just happened to have a teacher that had been a university professor, and he taught us a bit about medieval English literature, and I did give that a shot again at university. If I ever sound resentful or sad about my university experience, please also understand I was very grateful to be there. It's just I would have liked to have gone further. So, you feel it in your heart, and then you think, oh, hearing those tales in those languages, it has a whole different feel to it. I've, for a very long time, heard Indigenous people from here, like across Canada and the places that I've traveled or lived, speak about a sense of loss with language and the anger and bitterness about being forced or to not speak their languages or to feel bad about their languages and culture. You know, that hurt my heart. I really felt that in my heart. And don't think for 1 second that because someone is not of your culture that they can't uh, consciously or consciously relate to that. Please don't assume that, because it isn't true. I mean, there are people who just do feel things, and they feel them really deeply and truly. And there are others that just don't. And I personally prefer not to interact with people of that kind of cold nature. I do, and that's fine. You know, it's not that I have anything against them. It's just that I don't relate to that, and I don't like being judged as being that type of person when that's not who I am. And I think that there's far too much judging going on, judging by people's color, the way you speak, the money you earn. Yes, I suppose it's a natural instinct to assess someone when you don't know them. Is this sort of a safe person? And if they're not safe, why are they not safe? And what's going on in your head that makes you think they're not safe? Is it a belief in a stereotype, or do you have a genuine intuition about that person that you got this gut feeling that, oh, yeah, I probably shouldn't hang out with this person? I find that those intuitions transcend culture and appearance and things like that. You just have to follow your gut instinct, whatever it might look like to other people. But back to the stories, I feel it's really important, no matter how old you are, if you've missed out on these stories, go seeking them. There are some truly gifted storytellers now, and I'm really grateful for the internet, and I am really grateful for YouTube. And every now and then I hear these really snooty reactions to the internet as if it's a shallow place and that there's only really nonsense type of stuff on the internet. That is so not true. There are so many sincere and fantastic people doing great things on the internet that I find it shocking that anybody would actually believe that. They clearly haven't looked for themselves or know how to use search. You know, type in something you're interested in and press the little icon that looks like a magnifying glass, and you might just be pleasantly surprised. So I guess that's I know it's not a rant, it's just a rambling thought inspired by some things I heard today. I wrote a response regarding ephemeral beings, the Fae, and then I deleted it on one of these really actually very good and thoughtful videos. And I thought, no, that's a little too much to share in type. I think if I talk more about the Fae, again, the ephemera, it will be through my own video where I'm better able to express myself and people can hear my tone of voice and see the expression on my face, and that's just a nicer way of communicating, I find. And it's the next best thing to oral presentation face-to-face. You know, that's not realistic for us these days, and it should be something that we cherish when we're able to have these really nice, meaningful talks with one another. But, you know, it's great to do this little diary and share it with you. I don't get many likes, and I don't think that many people are looking at my videos, but if nothing else, it helps me to reflect on things. It helps me to really think and be clear in the way I'm expressing myself. So, that's it for today. Ta.